And just like that, we're back for episode 3. My name is Vanessa de Jesus Guzman. I'm a licensed therapist, mom coach, host of the Free to Be Mindful podcast, and public speaker. And I'm also lover of all things Sex in the City and just like that. And I'm here to give you the tea and takeaways through a clinical lens while keeping it light and fun. And speaking of public speaking, by the way, just putting it out there in the universe. If anyone ever wants to fly me out for a keynote, for a workshop, even if it is to boring Virginia, I'm here for it. I speak on mindful living, mental health, and personal growth, and I really focus on high performing, ambitious women and moms. Now, am I a momfluencer like Charlotte or LTW? Definitely not, but I am passionate about helping moms live with more clarity, purpose, and peace. So I really love this episode because I felt like most of it centered on a theme that hits home for a lot of us, especially women who identify as entrepreneurs, go getters, or boss babes who are just trying to do big things. And these women on set have it all together, right? Until they don't. This week, we saw what happens when that mask slips a little bit, even just a little bit. It really shows us a different aspect to each of them. So let's get into it character by character because you know I've got thoughts and I bet that you do too. So let's pour some tea, get into the takeaways, and we're going to start with Miranda. Not a ton of Miranda in this episode, but when she was on screen, she did make me laugh. Her one-liners are always so perfectly timed, and I'll give her credit where credit is due because I know that the last 2 episodes I haven't been too kind on Miranda. If you haven't watched the first 2 tea and takeaways, pause this, go back to those, and then come back to this one. So I do think that old Miranda, or rather young Miranda from back in the day, I think that old Miranda would have told Carrie off a little bit more. But I feel that now she's keeping it light and kind of respecting the space that Carrie's in, even though Carrie did call her out on it a little bit. I just don't think it was as harsh as it used to be. We did catch a little bit of that flirtation with that BBC reporter. And honestly, I'm here for it because finally, Miranda steps into the space of a potential relationship that makes sense for her. And dare I say it out loud, I'm almost excited to see where it goes. So, the therapist takeaway here is that sometimes growth does look like softness, and Miranda is slowly showing that growth. I think old Miranda again would have come in swinging, but we're seeing a slightly different version of her that leads with curiosity instead of wanting to have this control on all things at all the time. And remember that it's not regression, it's actually evolution because it shows a lot of growth. And this BBC reporter moment, it's a reminder that aligned relationships can feel like less drama and more at ease, which is what all of us should hope for instead of being caught up in this spiral where I feel like Miranda was caught up in episodes 1 and episodes 2. But she continues to be a good friend, of course. And another supportive friend is Anthony. And I know I say this in each and every episode, but he stays cracking me up each and every time. Even as himself, Mario Cantone was on Good Morning America this past week, and he truly had me laughing out loud, which is, believe it or not, really hard to do. So the line when he said, "Is body negativity back?" nearly spit out my drink because it is hilarious because it's true. This body image pressure kind of comes and goes in waves, and it's funny that he called that out. And then his boyfriend, Giuseppe, showing up for his boo. I mean, quite literally showing up for him. It was sweet. It was hilarious. It was adorable. And it's just really nice to see Anthony getting this attention from his boyfriend that he very well deserves, but isn't always open to it. So, the therapist takeaway here is that humor is a powerful coping tool, especially for people who may have had to learn to develop thick skin over the course of time. And what makes Anthony lovable isn't just his jokes, but what it really is, it's underneath all that sass, there's vulnerability. And in friendships or in relationships, it's that mix of levity and truth that builds on a true connection, which is what Anthony has with all of the characters. Moving on to Adam, just a sprinkle of Adam because he's not an official friend just yet, but I do like how they're integrating him into more and more scenes. And he's not only nice to look at, but he is quite funny as well. So when Seema tells Carrie, I like my men with sleeves and no writing on their shirts, you just have to love the writing. I always really give it up to the writers of the series. And I also appreciated seeing Adam's nephew, who's clearly on the spectrum, clearly to me at least, with the experience I have as an educator and as a therapist. And I like it because it was subtle but intentional. We could tell because of his comment about the car and then, quirky and looking down. And I really appreciate the diversity in the casting, even if it's that subtle, because that way viewers can see themselves on screen and that kind of representation really, really matters. So, therapist takeaway here, it's not so much on the character, but more for you, the viewers, is that when we see characters show up as real people, as people that we may know in our lives, with quirks, with humor, with these real life dynamics, it normalizes all of the different ways that we move through our worlds. Representation isn't just a buzzword that is nice to say. It really helps people feel seen. And that kind of visibility, even again in these very small moments, it plants the seed for connections. And I hope that we can keep that in our back pocket as we live through this just really intense political climate that we are currently in. So moving on to LTW, I let you know last week that I want to be LTW when I grow up. She's someone who I really admire. I love the way that she's sharp, she's stylish, she's in control. And I'm still, by the way, dumbfounded to the way that she finds time to cook. I don't think that that part is realistic because clearly I must be doing something wrong because I don't have the time to be in the kitchen on a daily like she does. But this episode pulls back the curtain a little bit on Lisa. And when her editor got an amazing job opportunity, and Lisa asked her to say because it's personal, to stay in the role because it's personal, it obviously didn't sit well. And I think that it was made to feel a little bit uncomfortable because it was just unfair. This is the same editor that stood by her side when she paused her work in order to grow her family. And by the way, if you want more of these unfair job related dynamics, I do encourage you to check out Netflix's Sirens and then check out the tea and takeaways that I did on that limited series. It's only 5 or 6 episodes because it was insane and all about this type of thing. But anyway, back to And Just Like That. I wanted to mention, there was a moment with Herbert, with her husband, where he gave her the dose of reality. He kept it real with her while still being respectful and having that love for her. And those are just relationship goals, right? We all need someone like that in our lives. So, therapist takeaway is that even the women who look like they have it all together, even they struggle with letting go. And when I say letting go, I mean letting go of the control, letting go of people, and letting go of the idea that we can't be scared. That moment with her editor showed us how she really has fear of losing stability, right? And fear of losing someone who's always held the space for her. And even that can make the most composed and the most confident people act out of a space of scarcity, which I think is what happened with Lisa in this episode. I don't think that she intentionally was trying to be a mean girl. I think that she was just scared. And growth means learning to celebrate someone else's next chapter, even if that next chapter means the end of the chapter with us. So I'm glad that the show shows how she fixed her wrong so quickly at that, how she was so quick to have a conversation the very next day. Because what happens with us normal people is that we feel bad maybe about the way that we acted or what we said, or we may get caught up in our feelings that then we let so much time fall in between that it's that makes it weird. And it's that we also ruin the relationships that we have with special people in our lives, right? To ruin these relationships unnecessarily. So something to think about as we again navigate our own lives. So let's see. Let's see how Lisa decides to show up. Let's see how she decides to move on with her big work project in future episodes without this editor who is obviously so very important to her. Another angle on women, on this ambition, on this guilt that sometimes women carry is Charlotte. Charlotte was being pushed to stay longer at work, not just to party, maybe a little to party, but also to make these sales that the young girls were making when she was fast asleep. And her reaction may have been or may have seemed a little bit dramatic when she was at the dinner table and she was like, my career is suffering because I'm a wife and I'm a mom. And her kids were kind of like, go, like, we don't even need you, right? And that's very, very real from the mom perspective, probably from the kid perspective too. It's probably something that I think a lot more than I ever say out loud because there is this tension, the space full of tension kind of between wanting to be a present parent and then wanting to thrive professionally. And when you have those two loves, that space really doesn't go away. So it was really sweet how again another supportive husband. Harry was so sweet, hilarious, and from being tired at the parties to peeing on himself to those jeans not bending and buttoning up, it was just sweet all the way around. And those party scenes, the after parties at 3 a.m. Once upon a time, yeah, absolutely. But in my 40s now, I'm glad I can just say, been there, done that, and most definitely do not miss it. So, as far as a therapist takeaway here, there is a quiet tug of war that working moms live through each and every day. And Charlotte put a voice to that quiet tug of war that so many moms and so many parents are afraid to voice because of that constant feeling of no matter where it is that you're showing up, you're falling short somewhere else. And that's not like being a martyr. That's really the mental load that moms especially carry. And naming it is often the first step towards changing it. So it is something that we should be okay to have these kitchen table talk conversations with our girlfriends and with our families or with our therapists. So this is part of the work that I do with women through private one-on-one coaching because it's definitely hard to be a mom, but then to be a mom with high hopes, with aspirations, and one who wants to put herself first in order to best serve her family, but doesn't know how to. And that can take a lot. And I'm here to help you with it. So if you're interested, I invite you to visit the link in the show notes to book a free 60-minute discovery call to see if this is meant for you. So moving on to Seema. And oof, this one again, it hit close to home. Her boss promised that she would take over the company when he retired. And instead, he offers it to the one and only Ryan Serhant. I hope I'm saying his last name correctly. And he is from the actual show Netflix Owning Manhattan, playing himself. And if you've never watched the show, this is another show that you should put on your must watch list because in real life, this is what he does. He's a real life real estate cutthroat real estate agent. And we see that on the show as well. So Seema has to decide, does she stay in a company who puts her in second place, who continues to put her in second place despite her building up the company, or does she finally bet on herself? And I'll share with you that a few years ago, I left an 18-year career in education, which had great insurance, tenure, a pension. And I did all of this to bet on myself. I went full time into private practice and entrepreneurship. And I'll share with you that it's a lot. It's very risky to start your own business, but it takes a lot of courage and a lot of faith, but it's so, so worth it. And when Carrie serves Seema with the line, you don't ask, you don't get, I felt that. And then when Seema sees her sign of don't back up, like don't back up, you're not going that way. And she thinks, why go backwards? I should invest in myself. I was all about it because I too was there. So the therapist takeaway here is that this is a big learning lesson that is actually a lot more than business, right? Even if you don't want to open up your own business, there may be something else that your heart is yearning for, and you don't know if it's worth it to take a risk on yourself. It's about being overlooked, after years of showing up. And that can happen again in business, in a job, or even in a relationship. When you realize that your loyalty has outlasted someone else's integrity, you need to do something about that. And for Seema and for so many women, the choice to bet on yourself isn't just a business decision, but it really becomes personal, and it's really a you reclaiming your worth. It's really hard, but at least for this character, what we know about Seema is that she's used to letting things go and betting on herself. So I really can't wait to see what happens and where she goes next. So here we are, moving on to Carrie. I know Carrie's still in love, and I know that she's in love with the idea of love, but the fact that she's now deciding to give Aiden a key to their house. I mean, should it surprise me? No, but does it? Ugh, I think you know how I feel about Aiden already, especially if you've watched the first two. It's a lot. And the fact that, again, cynical Miranda isn't really calling her out on it, I feel like I'm the only one thinking like this. I mean, if you think like this, definitely let me know in the comments. I can't be the only one thinking like this. But it did make me laugh, by the way, that when she said her license was expired in 2017, she's a true New York City girl. Living so close to the city, I can totally relate. I'll share with you that I didn't get my license until I was 21 years old because I just didn't have to. And one time I was actually pulled over for an expired registration because who knew that you had to pay attention to that little sticker at the front of your car? And thank goodness the officers were just so amused from my disbelief of it all that they let me go on the promise that I would go to DMV first thing in the morning the next day, which I did to get it renewed. But it reminded me of Carrie's little situation there. And as far as the therapist takeaway here, Carrie's nostalgia doesn't mean that she's emotionally ready, right? It's just that she's again in love with love. Just because a relationship has history doesn't mean that it necessarily has a future. And when we cling to something out of fear or out of this fantasy that we once had, then we kind of disillusion ourselves and we stop asking the questions that matter a lot, like, does this serve me right now? Or am I trying to recreate something that the timing has just passed? So let's see where Carrie goes. We can see that she's getting these inklings of reality, but she just hasn't gotten them fully yet. And finally, on to Aiden. I'm sure, again, if you've watched my takeaway of episode 1 and 2, you know how I already feel about Aiden. However, I was pleasantly surprised with him in this episode. When they finally, at the end of the episode, go back to his place and he tells Carrie that he didn't tell his sons that she was going to be there, so she would have to stay in the guest house until he could have that conversation in the morning, I was super duper pleasantly surprised because as a therapist who works with kids and parents, that's my area of expertise. Every single day, I see firsthand how often kids are caught in the middle of these adults trying to figure it out. And I know life doesn't come with a manual, but as a parent, you cannot put your kids' emotional needs last after your physical needs. And what I mean by that is that I often see adults either burying themselves in their wallows, right? Or trying to forever get back at their ex, or trying to just move on to the next person fast, that they actually end up doing a lot of damage to their kids, whether it be knowingly or unknowingly. So that's my major takeaway here is that introducing kids to a new partner too soon can feel harmless in the moment, like, oh, it's not a big deal, they won't understand, but it leaves long lasting emotional confusion for your kids. And in this situation, Aiden definitely protected his kids, but I wonder in some way if he also protected Carrie, because timing matters. And when you're building or rebuilding something, it's okay to take one step at a time. So in this case, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. I'm actually Team Aiden for taking it slow and not Team Carrie for wanting to give him a key to their house when it's her house. I'm still not feeling that situation. But anyway, we can't end the episode without talking about this business on the Adderall. Super odd, but also not unrealistic. Again, I've worked with kids and teens for 20 plus years, and I've seen how much ADHD medication can definitely help someone who absolutely needs it. However, and there is a big but in this sentence right here, medication without therapy is kind of like putting a band-aid on a huge, deeper cut. And this is where having a kid speak to a licensed therapist can be very helpful so that they can not only learn, but also sharpen the skills that perhaps they do already have when it comes to the executive functioning skills. And this is what often falls by the wayside when kids are diagnosed with ADHD. We just want to pop the pill because it's a little bit easier, but it's more important to treat the skills that kids are going to need for their entire lives that a pill just doesn't fix. So this is reading into the episode a little bit, but did you catch Aiden's face when Carrie gave him the pills? He didn't seem to be really thrilled. He just put them in his pocket, but I thought I saw something there. So I wonder what he's feeling underneath that face and if he agrees with me or if it's about something else. We will see. So the takeaway here is that again, medication has its place, but we can't just medicate things without actually addressing the deeper issue. And kids need tools, they need structures, and they need a lot of emotional support alongside any prescription, regardless of the diagnosis. So that was episode 3, the light stuff and the more heavy, real stuff. And it lets me thinking about a lot. What I loved about this episode is that, again, it reminded us that women who have it all together, with the wardrobe, with the careers, with the lavish homes, the luscious gardens, even though there are rats in there, and with these beautiful shoes, even they feel unsure about things. And even they question their worth from time to time. And it seems like even they ask, is this really what I want? Or at least that's what it seems that they're thinking. And whether it's Seema deciding to bet on herself or Lisa facing the fear of being left behind or Charlotte wrestling with the reality of being a working mom, this episode definitely peels back the layers and went deep in thought on this topic. And then there's Carrie, of course, still holding on, still hoping for clarity. But in my opinion, again, I think she's starting to realize little by little that there are some things there. And my bet is that she'll probably become much more clearer in the episode after next, because next week's episode, it seems that they're still in Virginia having some fun. So we'll see. I adore what we're seeing with all these women navigating their ambition and their relationships, motherhood, friendship, aging, identity, sometimes gracefully, sometimes not, but for the most part, always realistically. I really do appreciate that. And I hope that you know whether you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 50s, whether you're a Carrie or a Sema or a Charlotte or somebody totally in between, you're not the only one who's still figuring it out. So, as always, I want to hear from you. Which storyline hit closest to home for you? What did you find yourself nodding to or yelling to or laughing at the screen about? And what would you do if you were specifically in Seema's shoes this episode? So, drop a comment below. I really do read the comments, and it really is me that responds to them. So, please engage. I am here for it. And as Carrie said, you don't ask, you don't get. So I am humbly asking, please subscribe to the channel, share if it resonated with a friend, share it, and come back next week around the same time, definitely the same place, to unpack the next episode, which again, from the teaser, it already looks like it's going to be a fun one. Thanks for watching Tea and Takeaways, and I'll see you next week.